10.3 and 11.2. This is non-Mendelian. Non-Mendelian inheritance, or as I like to think of it, we're going to list some of the ways Mendel. Oh, look at today is the 14th. All right, so we're just going to do kind of a grab bag of various terms and kind of describe the terms, but each one is a unique situation in the genetics world. We've done Mendelian traits, nice and simple, dominant, recessive, right? That was our classic purple flower, white flower example. But there's lots of things that aren't quite like that. For example, you can have what's called codominance. Codominance, or just all one word, codominance. So instead of having like, I don't know, we'll use red here just for flowers. Instead of having a red flower that's dominant and a white flower that's recessive, and then you breed them, and then if you ever have one of the, big R alleles, you'll be red. So like if this was big R, and this is little r. In this scenario, you cross them, and they all end up big R, little r, right? But instead of being red, any guesses what happens when they're codominant?
They're half red.
They're half red, yeah. They're pink. And I can't draw pink very well, as I don't have a pencil, but we'll just shade them in. They're in between. Something like that, right? And then if you cross them again, 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll still get your classic 4 combos, and again, red, pink, pink, white. Yeah, so codominance just means that they're both the big R and the little r are expressed. There's not just a regular classic dominant and recessive version. And what's really happening here when you zoom in on the cellular level is both the white pigments and the red pigments are being produced on these flowers. So they'll produce the white pigments and they'll produce some red pigments. But because half of the genes code for the big R, they produce red pigments. So they're both being expressed in one way. There's another way that's really similar. It's called incomplete dominance. And we'll use plant size for this one. So you could have a tall plant. Sorry. Incomplete dominance. So big T, big T. If you cross it with a short plant, little t, which you'll end up with, any guesses? you'll have big T, little t, big T, little t, and they'll be medium. And then again, big T, big T, big T, little t, little t, little t. If you have two big T's, you're tall. If you have one of each, you'll be medium. If you have little t, you're short. All right, so that's a good example of incomplete dominance where, like, yeah, the tall one's dominant. You'll be taller if you have a big T, but it's not as awesome as if you have two big T's, then you'll be super tall. Okay, next up, we're gonna look at the color of the pea pods here for a second. Or we'll look at the color of the peas. So there's two traits on peas. You can have the actual pea itself. You can have green, which we'll do with big G, or yellow, which is little g, right? So it can be green and yellow. You can also have smooth, which we'll do with a big S, or wrinkled, which is a little s. And in this situation, this is what we're going to call linked traits. So in linked traits, they just happen to be on the same chromosome. So Mendel was really lucky. He ended up picking traits that were all on different chromosomes on these plants. He happened to also pick traits to follow that didn't do codominance or incomplete dominance. And he happened to get ones that are on different chromosomes. What happens if this green and yellow trait is on the same chromosome as the smooth and wrinkly trait? Any idea? Well, let's take a look at the chromosomes real quick. So we'll do our classic little chromosome version of this cross. So we'll have our two genes. I should have done smooth and wrinkly in a different color. We'll do smooth and wrinkly with the brown. So you have a smooth, wrinkly gene here. This guy's dominant for both. This guy will be recessive for both, for smooth and wrinkly. So this is small s, small s. This is big S, big S. And then on that same chromosome, we're going to have the color of the pea pod, the green or the yellow. We'll make him dominant again. And we'll make this one recessive. So this is big G, big G. And this is little g, little g. Okay, they're going to do their cross. And remember, you inherit entire chromosomes from your parents, right? You don't just inherit single genes, you inherit the entire chromosome. One of these chromosomes at random is going to be chosen for this first kid, right? One of these chromosomes at random is going to be chosen. Same deal with the other kids. They're all going to randomly choose one of each. So they're all going to end up the same, with one big S and one small s. And then same deal with the G's. They end up with one big G, one small G. So big G, little g, big G, little g, big S, little s, big S, little s. Cool, and we'll do our F2 generation. Okay, here's our four options. could get both of the solid chromosomes, solid colored in chromosomes, right? That's big G, big S, big S. Or you could get one of each. Solid, recessive, solid, recessive. This was what, big G, big G, little g. And then same with this one. What was it, big S, little s, big S, little s. Or you can get two of the recessive type chromosomes, right? So it's small s, small s. Small g, small g. So let's take a look at the phenotypes for just a second. We had a green and smooth pea pod. So green and smooth. And we cross that with a yellow wrinkly one. Bring it down, sorry. Okay. All of the offspring were what phenotype? What's the phenotype of the offspring of this cross? They all are big G, little g, so is that green or yellow?
That's green.
Green. Are they big S, small s, so therefore they're? Smooth, yeah. So all of the offspring are green and smooth. Okay, and then we cross those. We cross that F1 generation. We get our 4 options. 1, 2, 3, 4. What are our 4 options? Carter, use your neck muscles. There you go. They're all what?
Big G, big G.
Yeah, what is that? What color is that? Green. What smoothness is it at? Lucas, you do. Head up. Big S, so therefore it's smooth. So that's green and smooth. What's this one? Green and smooth. What's this one? Green and smooth. What's this one? Yeah, wrinkled and yellow. 2, 3, and the 4th option is wrinkly and yellow. Yeah, so these are linked. If they were not linked, you'd expect on this final generation, so this is the unlinked version, you'd expect there to be a bunch of options. You'd expect what portion of them to be wrinkly? You'd expect a quarter of them to be wrinkly, right? And you'd expect a quarter of them to be yellow, but it doesn't necessarily mean the same quarter. What you'd get is you'd get actually 16 different options. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If it was unlinked, you'd expect 2/3 of them to be green. So green, 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 green. But of those 2/3, you'd expect 1/4 of them to be wrinkly. So green and wrinkly, green and wrinkly, green and wrinkly, right? Okay, you'd expect a quarter to be yellow, but 2/3 of those yellow ones to be smooth. 1, 2, 3, and only a quarter of them to be yellow and wrinkly. Right, so this is what Mendel found with all of his traits. He found that, the pea, the color of the pea didn't actually match the color of the flower. There was no linkage between the two. But if they're unlinked, they're completely random. Here's the other cool thing about linkage. Before they actually had like electron microscopes to zoom in on these chromosomes and actually see like what was going on, or before they had sequencing technology to be able to sequence these, they were actually able to figure out how close the genes were to each other on the chromosome. Any idea how they did that? Do the chromosomes ever like exchange what's on here? Yeah, they do during crossing over, remember? During meiosis. During metaphase, they can actually swap sections. So even when they're linked, sometimes you end up with ones that are yellow and round and stuff like that because there's that crossing over event that happens. If they're really, really close to each other, the crossing over has to happen between them, so it's really unlikely. And so they could just, based on how likely it was that these patterns are broken, they could figure out how far apart these genes were from each other. That was pretty cool. All right, a few more. So that's linked traits. Next up, polyploidy. So we already have a haploid. Has how many copies in humans? How many different chromosomes are in a haploid cell in humans? 23, yep. So we just consider 23 the N number for humans, and then we say they're haploid, so they have one copy of each. If they're diploid cells, they have 2N. Here's the weird thing, and this doesn't happen in humans or in animals very often, but it happens all the time in plants. There'll be some weird version where there'll be some sort of incomplete meiosis, and one of these sex cells will be diploid. And if it happens to find a diploid sex cell of the other type, they will still match together, and they will be a big happy family, and you'll have a tetraploid individual, 4N. So now it has 4 copies of every gene, right? And in fact, when we purposely breed traits into plants, they often end up with as a polyploid plant. Because a lot of these traits are like how big the fruit grows, how quickly it grows. If it has extra copies of the chromosomes, it can get grow really fast and grow lots of fruit. And so we have selectively bred this into some plants. Wheat, like modern wheat, no genetic engineering involved, just through selective breeding, is 32N. Isn't that wild? Another polyploidy version that happens in Alaska are fish farms. So when you start a fish farm in Alaska, people are like, oh, farm fish, whatever. But all the rules are you have to do something kind of like this. What you do when you take your eggs, you get your eggs from fish that are tetraploid, basically. So all of the eggs are 2N. They're 2N sex cells. Then you get the sperm from regular old haploid fish. So the regular old diploid fish, so the sperm are haploid. When they combine, what's the resulting fertilized egg? What's 1N plus 2N? 3N, yeah, so it's 3N. This is why people call them Frankenfish. They're just fear-mongering, so you don't have to worry about it. They're like, oh, they're genetically engineered. Yeah, but only the mom was genetically engineered. And the only reason she did that is so that they were triploid. What's the advantage of having triploid fish?
More
Here's the problem with having an odd number of chromosomes. When it comes time to do meiosis, can you do an even split? No, you cannot do an even split. Therefore, these guys can't do meiosis and they are sterile. So all of the farm fish in Alaska, and as far as I know, the US, anything that could compete with like natural populations, people are like, oh, what if the farm fish get loose and get into the natural population? Well, they're triploid fish. They are literally incapable of breeding with the quote unquote natural populations. So that's a good example of like humans using the polyploidy to our advantage, or another good example. Okay, another one is polygenic. This is when you have lots of genes to do the same thing. Classic example, this comes up on the news sometimes, is when two people have a kid and their skin color like doesn't match the parents. And this can happen when you have like, okay, hypothetical situation here. You have someone who's black as a grandparent and someone who's white as a grandparent, and they have a kid. That kid will probably have skin that is what? If if a person was one like black parent and one person that is like super white, that resulting person is usually what? Yeah, they're usually in between somewhere, right? Yeah. So they have kind of like, I can't shade here, so it's not spotted, but they're like in between, right? They're somewhere on that spectrum of like, really pale skin versus really dark skin. They're kind of in between. Same deal if you have, let's say we have another set of grandparents like this, doesn't matter which, someone with really dark skin, someone with really light skin, they have a kid, you end up with someone in between. Yeah. Okay, so these two people both have like kind of medium darkness on their skin tone, right? They get married, they have some kids. Okay. It's not a single gene. So if it was a single gene, you'd expect a quarter of the kids to come out as white, a quarter of the kids to come out with black. No. There's about 16 genes that do skin color. Is it possible if I take a coin, here's the coin, and I flip this coin, is it possible to get heads 16 times in a row?
It's possible. It's unlikely.
Yeah, it's unlikely, but it's going to happen once every, I don't know, what's 2 to the 16th? It's not insanely uncommon. Yeah, once every 65,000 times. If somebody flips this 16 times, I'm going to get heads every single time. Are there 65,000 people in the world? Yeah, okay. So occasionally, what really happens here is you have this spectrum, and it follows a bell curve. And you have like, is it possible, because both parents are carriers for both types of genes, right? Every single one of their skin color alleles is heterozygous in this situation, right? So they're carrying a whole bunch of alleles for dark skin, they're carrying a whole bunch of alleles for light skin. On average, you'd expect most of them to come out kind of in between. So it's this bell curve. But it's possible to have a really rare chance of having like a really dark skinned child, or a really rare chance of having a light skinned child. So this will come up on the news where like this couple who has, pretty dark skin has this really light skinned baby. And then all of a sudden there's like this big, oh no, it can't be their child because they're obviously were cheating with the milkman or whatever. Like, no. Like, it can happen where you have kids that have a lot darker or a lot lighter skin than the parents. Well, whatever. That's like milkman. I get all my marital infidelity advice from the 50s. All right, last one. We'll talk about sex-linked traits. And I think I mentioned this before when we were talking about the chromosomes. And our 23rd chromosome in humans is the X and the Y chromosome, right? So we'll draw the beautiful large X. And in males, the Y chromosome is this tiny little thing. It doesn't have a lot of genes on it. Whereas in females, you have an X and an X. The two that come to my mind off the top of my head, one is baldness. Male pattern baldness is a gene that is on the X chromosome, strangely enough, right? So if I, as an individual who is an X chromosome and a Y chromosome, if I become bald, where did I get that bald gene from? Where do I get my X chromosome from? Your mom, right? So if you end up going bald, you can blame it on your mother. It does not matter at all if your dad is bald to find out whether or not you go bald. What you got to do is you have to look at your mother's brothers, if she has any, because that'll give you a hint as to whether or not you might go bald. Another really common one, though, which we're going to follow, is color blindness. Yes?
Okay, so if baldness is in the X chromosome, or the X chromosomes, and females are XX, how come we get the Y?
Yeah, it's not expressed in women. That brings us to our final one, which is called epistasis.
You can have cancer and not be bald.
I know.
No, as a general rule, women can be carriers for male pattern baldness, but they don't express it. And I'll cover that last one as epistasis. That's our final thing. But let's talk about color blindness for just a second. Is color blindness very common? Not particularly common. It's less than like 5%. I don't have a thing off the top of my head. Less than 5% of the population is colorblind.
Are you blind?
I'm not blind, no. Nor am I colorblind. I can see all the colors. One of your teachers is colorblind, though. Is Ratslav colorblind, too?
Yeah, you can't see.
Really? Oh, no way.
You charge your phone.
Oh, whatever, that'll be fine. It's plugged in. I didn't know Ratslav was colorblind. I knew Johnson was, though. But, yeah, the colorblind is less than 5%, right? So, if you have a 5% chance of as a chromosome of carrying color blindness, right? That means men, on average, what percentage of men are colorblind?
5%.
Yeah, it'd be 5%, right? Because if all you have is an X and a Y, the only thing that matters is that X, right? So you need to be, have the color blindness allele, right? So it's 0.05. They have a higher chance of having a colorblind gene. But here's the problem. Color blindness, is it dominant or recessive? Make a guess. Recessive, yeah. Usually when it's a gene that does not work, it's a recessive gene. So color blindness is recessive. So do women have a higher or lower chance of being colorblind? Lower, because the only way you can be colorblind is if you've got 2 copies of that colorblind allele, right? So what are the odds that your first copy is the colorblind gene? 5%, right? What are the odds that your second one is a colorblind copy? 5%. What is 5% of 5%? You multiply them. Is it 25%?
0.25.
0.025.
He's missing lots of zeros.
0.0025. 0.000.
Or 0.00. It's less than 1/4%, right? Yeah.
Hey, that's what I said.
Yeah. So, and this is with something like color blindness. And again, I just made up this number. We can look up the exact numbers. But the point is, it is 95 times more common in males than it is in women. Right? Or yeah, whatever it is going to be. No, women can be colorblind, but it's just a lot more rare. Okay, epistasis is where one trait masks another. So, for example, if you had a trait that was fur versus no fur, and then you had another trait that was, I don't know, brown fur versus white fur. So we'll put this big F, little f. And this is big B, and this is little b. Well, if you were, I think I swap colors. If you were a big F, little f, little b, what would you look like? Would you have fur?
Yeah.
What color would it be? White. Here's my little bunny. Oh, I don't know. He has goiter. What if he had fur? Keep mixing colors up. What if he had fur, like big F, and then he had brown fur? What would he look like? We have this brown rabbit, right? But it's also possible that you have both of the no fur alleles. And then no matter what, whether or not you had brown fur or white fur, this is just the pigment allele, right? This says, hey, when you grow hair, make it grow brown or make it grow white. This is the one that actually says you should grow hair. So you'd end up with a naked little I gotta draw a furless rabbit, whatever that looks like. There we go. That's not too bad. That's probably what a rabbit would look like without fur.
Yeah, mine would.
Why is it always wrinkly?
It's wrinkly because its skin is all wrinkly underneath the fur. Have you ever shaved a rabbit?
Oh.
Gross. All right.
No.
Really? You've never shaved a rabbit?
You want yours to shave that?
Yeah, like every Tuesday we shave rabbits in my house. It's not a thing.
Have you?
No, I've never shaved a rabbit. Don't be weird. All right.
Not if you have a vet. Then it wouldn't be weird.
You'd be shaving rabbits, yeah, but I don't know if you'd like shave them like totally off. Unless I had like mange or something. All right. The point being is if you have the no fur allele, it doesn't matter what your other allele is. Same deal with women in the baldness, right? It doesn't matter if they're a carrier for the bald gene. Since it's male pattern baldness, there's an epistasis effect where you need to have some of the male genes in order for male pattern baldness to take effect. So that's why you can be curious. Anyway, none of these things came up when Mendel was doing his little pea plants. He was always just doing the really simple things. And so he got really, really lucky, because if you go out and like just follow 6 traits, there's a really good chance that you're going to get like codominance, multiple alleles, something like that. Or incomplete dominance. But he liked that. All right, let's talk about the project. Y'all have a copy of it?